Yeah, I've never really done this before, so this is going to be a little interesting to me. So, hello, welcome to my Clear World deck profile. We have had support finally after, what was it, like 15 or 10 years? I think it was about like 10 years, somewhere around there, since we had the imported Clear World first two cards, which was this Clear World from Stardust Overdrive and Clear Vice Dragon, which unironically I do not run it because it's unfortunate that it's not similar to the anime that would negate and destroy if it were to be destroying it. Unfortunately, it was actually kind of dumbed down. Unfortunately, that's the only card that I wish they had maybe re-errated and then just dynamically changed to match the meta. But enough talk about that. I just wanted to show you all how I would build my Clear World deck. And starting with, and I have it in order, ready for this reason, is obviously Clear World, a wonderful field spell that is basically, in a sense, like a floodgate and prevents your opponent from doing certain things, but also in a very particular manner. And I'll go ahead and briefly describe it real quickly. So basically, light. If your opponent controls a light monster, you get to see everything they play from their hand. They must reveal their hand, which is, wow, hand knowledge in my Yu-Gi-Oh? Okay. Dark, if they control two or more monsters, they cannot declare an attack. And Dark is renowned for having many, many monsters on the field. It's almost like this concept of, Takahashi's way of how he designed cards initially anyway. And they're kind of relative to what most decks are, but not all of them. Earth, during your standby phase, destroy a face-up defense position monster you control, which was usually associated with like rocks and earth monsters who have high defense. Then they would be destroyed. Water, during your end phase, you must discard a card, which is the concept of certain cards we know today, like Mermail Atlantean, that loves discarding cards for effects. Fire, during your end phase, take 1,000 damage. Hello, Volcanics. And many other burn decks that are usually associated with Pyro sometimes. And then Wind, you must pay 500 life points to activate a spell card, though granted, not many wind decks usually associate too many spells, at least to my knowledge. But I guess it's just this concept that, wind is like green, and so spells would be green. So I suppose that's fine, but I guess it's somewhat similar to the concept of, how the smorg of divinity birds were, in a sense, regarding spell and traps, that you would have to pay life points to set them, or to a certain extent. So I guess it's kind of relative to that, but it's just weird that we don't really have any, I don't think, at least from the top of my head, that we had any wind decks that involved that. So 3 copies of Clear World, and then 3 copies of Clear Wall, because this is one of the newer support cards. Does it help the plan of Clear World? It does. Is it completely useful? I'm not 100% sure. It's kind of okay, but basically, while Clear World is on the field, and then you have this card also on the field, you can activate its effect, which is to add a Clear World monster from your deck to your hand, or should I say a monster that mentions it, which is very interesting about that. And then you can only use that once per turn, of course, and only once. And then monsters that mention Clear World that you control, or actually no, not even you control, it's just any monsters that mention, so it'll be fun for a wonderful battle mirror match. Cannot be destroyed by battle, and you take no battle damage involving that, which is kind of nice. No protection from destruction, which, again, my assumption is why it wasn't included was because, again, initially Clear Vice Dragon was the one that did that for you. But again, it's just unfortunate that Clear Vice Dragon did not get re-errated with an original anime effect, or slightly even better. But, yeah. And then the more important reason why you want this, aside from just deck to hand, which is still nice, even though it is heavily reliant on also you can't do this unless you also have Clear World. Aside from this, is you can, if you control a level 7 or higher monster that again mentions Clear World, your opponent then just receives every single effect regardless of the attributes they had controlled regarding the effects of Clear World. So that means they'll be affected by all 5 effects, which means they'll always have their hand revealed and so on and so forth. Cannot attack if they have 2 monsters. So it's pretty nifty. Very, very sweet to definitely have a 3 of, and that's why it's useful. So, reason why you want to really involve Clear Wall is mostly because of the concept of Clear Cube for having 0 attack and defense. But even if not, it's still a great effect, even though you will sacrifice some life points in its use, which is, as always, all clear cards are allowing you to not be affected by Clear World, so you don't take any repercussions. But basically, during your main phase, you can normal summon and set 1 additional clear monster in addition to your normal summon set. You can only gain that effect once per turn, which is very nice. So if this card... Sadly, I kind of wished it was also if it was face down, so it would be a surprise. But which is why, again, I guess that's why Clear Wall exists, so you don't take battle damage when you have it and when you need it. But basically, when this face-up card leaves the field, and the other thing I like about this is that it is by an opponent's card, so just if your opponent did anything. I do like how it's not under your control only if it leaves the face-up field, as well as it's not a hard once per turn, but once this card that's face-up leaves the field by your opponent's card, you can special summon any monster that mentions Clear World from your deck, including itself. And it's not hard once per turn. So you can easily deck thin to a clear cube, and then to a clear vicious knight if you're in trouble. So it better than nothing. I know, granted, you know, Ash Blossom would love to say hello, but I mean, yeah, you could just run, you know, something like, call by or something to protect you from that punishment when you really need it most. Next up is Clear Phantom, which is you can discard 2 cards, including this card. So basically, in hindsight, discard this card and 1 other card. Add 2 cards from your deck to your hand that mention Clear World, or spell traps that spell traps that mention Clear Worlds or that are Clear World. My apologies. Now, the interesting about this is that I love how it mentions spell traps, which means I still want to have Copium to believe that we have potential traps, and maybe even more types of spells. I doubt not that much, probably just like 2 or 3 of them, so, you know, there's that. But you can only use this effect once per turn, so, you know, it's a pretty much all-in situation. You go Ultra Minus if you get ashed, so... You know, but if it goes off, it is a wonderful benefit that really solidifies your game plan. So there's that. And also, once per turn if this card is destroyed, not a hard once per turn, you can target a monster your opponent controls and destroy it. And if you do, send the top 3 from their deck to the graveyard. Now, I like the destroy part. I'm not too privy on the send from deck to graveyard, but that was more or less, I believe, the original anime effect. So I'll go ahead and accept that, and it's still fine, because usually you want to discard it anyway. You don't usually want to end up summoning it unless you're desperate, obviously, you had nothing else you can do. But usually, I mean, you might as well just discard it, because if you didn't already have an out or a good hand size, you might as well do the latter. Clear Rage Golem is kind of just one of our normal monsters that we can actually just use for damage. But it is still a nice card when it's normal or special. Nice that it mentions special. Not sure how you would special summon this too often, other than, of course, with, you know, Clear Cube. But the only problem with that is it's only if you were trying to do something on your turn, because when this effect is activated, because you can, it's only for the turn. Monsters that mention Clear World can attack directly this turn. But like, I kind of also wish that maybe it would be nice if it was not just for the turn, but maybe like it would grant everyone to attack directly only once, rather than just during the turn it was summoned, and then only apply the effect to the cards that was summoned during that turn. Would have been a little bit nicer, but you know, it's not like there's going to be like a lot more Clear World types of monsters. If anything, I only predict like they might give us 1 more, that isn't related to the direct anime, because there's only 5 clear world monsters, and I feel like it would make sense to have 6, because it's almost like a pseudo reference to 6 attributes. So I feel like we would have 6 monsters that mention clear world, but you know, give and take. But that's just taking you know, liberties with that regarding card design. But anywho, you can only use that effect once per turn, which I suppose is fine. This is attacking directly, and clear world monsters do not play around, especially of the next monster that I'm going to mention. But also, in addition, when this card specifically inflicts battle damage by in general or by a direct attack, hence the effect even after the fact, you can even inflict more damage by 300 points for each card in your opponent's hand, which is kind of nice. You know, everyone in Yu-Gi-Oh knows that having a hand is very important to, you know, do things in the game. Anyway, here is the new pseudo boss monster, until maybe, hopefully maybe, they might either re-errata clear Vice Dragon or even make a new variant that actually is actually similar to the anime, unfortunately. But this is the boss monster. This is the real boss, and that's Clear Vicious Knight. And you can tribute summon this card for tributing one monster that mentions Clear World. So, oh my god, he's level 7. I'm going to need 2 tributes, and I'm glad they did this, because theoretically, again, we don't have that many Clear World monsters, and I doubt we ever will, because there is only very few of them. So it's really nice that they added that in there. Also gains attack equal to the highest original attack, so that does not include added attack, which I suppose is a little unfortunate, but considering the fact that it already has 2300 base attack, means that if anything else, as long as the added attack from the original attack does not exceed 2300, then I guess it's still mostly going to be good for the most part. And then you get to choose if tied, apparently. Also, in addition to this, when this card that is tribute summoned, so you cannot just have this effect active if you use it with Clear Cube, so I understand that, and that explains why Clear Cube gets you an additional Zoner set. But if you had tribute summoned this card, and it's in the monster zone, your opponent cannot activate effects of special summoned monsters on the field with less attack than this card, and does not state original attack. So basically, this will have 2300 base attack, then it will also basically be the highest attack of original attack based on any of your opponent's monsters that they control. So basically, it'll always be higher than it, and also by 2300. So basically, in hindsight, no special summon monsters can activate the effect unless somehow your opponent manages to give them more than 23 or exactly 2300 attack by other card effects. So therefore, it shuts down their plays, and only specifically for them, so that's really nice. It's kind of like a skill drain in a sense, but more appropriated. And now, we're not done yet. I have another engine, obviously, and that is the Horus engine. The Horus engine, I think, is almost a very perfect... I think it's probably the most perfect, at least in my opinion, again. But you can build whatever Clear World deck you want. But I think this one, Horus really helps Clear World really affiliate the factors of its weaknesses, especially when you really need to go in for that discard to add the 2 Clear World Field spell and the Clear Wall that is usually necessary with it, since those are the only 2 cards we have at the moment. And, you know, if you discard, well, not Imseti, but if you discard any of the other Horus cards that I'm about to show earlier, or even Imseti, if you already had Imseti to go off and King Sark, that, you know, you could summon it back later with King Sark, so you don't really get penalized. It's more of a benefit because you sent it to the graveyard for a good reason and a good cost. So 3 Imsetis, and basically, I'm going to go ahead and read the effects, of course. Pretty sure most of us are acquainted with it, but I'm going to describe it anyway. Obviously, if you control King Sark, you can special summon this from your graveyard inherently. Basically, you can only summon each one of these Horus cards only once per turn these ways. Once per turn, you can send 2 cards from your hand to the graveyard, including this card. So it's similar to the other one regarding the Clear World monster. So you discard itself and any other card. Sorry, is this discard or send? I just have to make sure. No, this one's send, not discard, just to be specific, and they have to be to the graveyard. Go ahead and add a King Sark from your deck to your hand, and then after you resolve that and shuffle your deck, you draw a card on the top of your deck, which is really weirdly interesting, but hey. So basically this one is a neutral affiliation of you pretty much get your cards back, but you plus in the fact that this is in the graveyard, plus maybe even another horse card in the graveyard to get the card, which is King Sark, to special summon it from said graveyard after the fact, and then you draw a card to reincur the factor of what you spent, which is pretty decent. But anywho, if another card you control is destroyed by your opponent's card effect, while this is in the monster zone, and of course it's during the damage step, you can send a card on the field to the graveyard. Non-targeting. Send a card on the field to the graveyard. So, as always, Horus is very great, especially in SETI, because it non-targets sends to the graveyard, not destroys, so it usually goes against most triggers in most cases unless they state leaves the field, but even so, very great removal tool. Has 3,000 attack, and 1,800 defense isn't half bad, but, you know, I run 3 of those. And of course, with the 3 of those means I'm going to be using 3 Gold King's Sarcophagus. And again, I think this really helps Clear World to a great extension. Horus monsters can be destroyed by card effects that do not target them. So in other words, if someone uses a Regeki or a Dark Hole, it ain't going to happen. Of course, granted, and then it kind of helps in this sense because, you know, if you have like Clear Cube on the field, it really helps the that situational factor. Like, you know, you get to summon any other Clear World monster and deck then, or you can just run into another Clear Cube and then your Horus monsters will activate, and it becomes a great benefit there for a chain, because obviously your opponent's going to want to try and get rid of your Clear Cube or your Clear World monsters, especially when you already have the setup of Clear Wall and whatnot, because they'll be receiving some effects, at least for now. Or additionally, if you want to punish them immediately, you can just summon Clear Vicious Knights so they can receive all the effects, even though technically their special summon monsters will still be able to go off, but they will still be severely punished and probably won't be able to do anything unless they get rid of that afterwards. So it's a very good flotation device in combination with the concept of King Sark. So basically, also, in addition to that, you can send a card from your hand to your graveyard to send more Horus monsters from your deck to your graveyard, so you can summon as many as you like. Unless you're worried about Nibiru, of course. But, you know, there's that. And then, of course, even for battle purposes, you know, when your Horus monster battles an opponent's monster, you can send that opponent's monster to the graveyard, which, again, non-targeting send through the effect of a spell card, but not a monster, is very interesting in itself. So obviously I run 3 of this, and then I only run 1 of each of course, everyone's favorite, Happy, but I also use at least 1 Dalmatif, and when I don't know how to pronounce that name, but I'm going to say Quishbinef. I'm just going to call it that, because it really facilitates a good assortment of Horus cards for extra deck summoning, which we'll describe later after I'm done with most of the main deck explanation. And obviously the reason why everyone likes to use Happy, he's pretty much similar to other Horus cards. His only technicality here is that if a card leaves the field that by your opponent's card effect, then you can just add any 2 cards from your graveyard or banishment to your hand. So it's good re-incursion cost, especially when you perhaps didn't get the Clear Phantom. Yeah, Clear Phantom to go off and your opponent ashed it, but then you have the secondary concept of, you know, King Sark and obviously Happy, and then you can just summon him and hope to re-incursion some of that lost situation if you can manage to live. So it adds any 2 cards from the graveyard or banishment back to your hand, which is really nice. But it also applies to your opponent, weirdly enough, I believe. So that's interesting. And then Dalmatif is truly the re-incursion of card advantage, and basically if a card leaves the field for his situation, then you get to draw cards based on how many different names of monsters you had on your field after that happened. So it's basically a draw card scenario. This thing can get very big with a full field because it gains 1200 attack and I believe and defense for each for each Horus monster you control. So, you know, granted, we run like 4 of these. I assume it includes itself, so that's times 5. So this thing can get very crazy when you get the entire horus package in. Although it's still kind of a risk because if you know, Valors it or anything or negates its effects, it just becomes 0. So that's a problem. And of course, this one I just added in here. No one really uses this one literally at all, but I still do because it's a nice name. And basically, when a card leaves the field by your opponent, in this case, this one will activate. Basically, your opponent's monsters cannot target these for attacks, even though technically you would think it would not be good because, you know, King Sark will not be able to activate, but it protects you. Your opponent just cannot attack them anymore and cannot target them with card effects. So in a sense, why it's called Protector is because it does that. So it alleviates the factors of targeting, and then of course King Sark already on the field is non-targeting, and then they can't be attacked, so that means they can't even destroy the battle. So basically, in a sense, you're free to pass. So, and we can go into some tech cards of my personal choice. You can change them at your leisure, of course. But basically, I run 3 Allure of Darkness, and that is just draw 2 cards and banish a dark. And if you don't, send all of them to the graveyard. But considering that Imseti is a dark and every other clear world monster is also dark associated, this is not really much of a risky card to use unless you really have no hand. But I mean, either way, it's mostly going to come off. So I use 3 of these for the correlation of card advantage and to go through the deck. Of course, 1 Pot of Prosperity. You know, just to since I mean we do have an extra deck because thanks to again the horus package, but even then mostly not all of it is used, so you could actually banish some resources to have this. And the only small confliction about Pot of Prosperity is when you want to try and use this when you have this in Imseti over here, but you can't draw the card from Imseti at the end, so you still kind of minus in a sense. Excuse me. So Pot of Prosperity is a very good accommodation for that. And banish 3 of the 6 extra deck monsters of your choice, and then reveal that many excavate on the top of your deck, and then add 1 from your deck to your hand, and then put the rest in the bottom deck of any order, but you cannot draw cards for the rest of the turn. And then we have some hand traps, and we're starting with 3 Nibiru, because even though technically Horus is a very decent stun deck in my opinion, I feel like if you're not going to be going first, you might as well try and yeet your opponent with a giant rock and distribute all their monsters if they Noro summoned or set more than 5 times. And additionally, my next 3 of is similar to that, which is evenly matched for about the same reason. Or if somehow they totaled your entire board during your first turn, then the only thing you can rely on is, again, more technical removal. And I think that helps very decently. Now, granted, again, I already know you can do what you wish in this deck profile suggestion, but technically I forgot to put these in, so I replaced them with effect failures, but effect failures can do too. But technically these 3 are supposed to be imperm, which again we all know that negates monster effects, so there's that. Very good, and also can stop. And then my only weird tech choice that is not standard is RGB Rainbow Lucian. I honestly think this card from Battles of Legends Monsters Revenge is very interesting because it helps with the clear world. Now, I wanted to run like 2, but I feel like it's not worth to run more than 2. So it's a 1 of, so it's just a very interesting tech choice. Basically, you can target a face-up monster once per turn on the field. It becomes machine type, so that kind of hacks up some decks that are non-machine reliant in terms of typing. But it also gives them every single attribute, except for Divine, even though we all know that Divine is considered an attribute by game mechanics. But they gain all the basic attributes aside from Godhood, even if this card leaves the field. So even if you could not keep this on the field, you could still chain it to give these deterring effects to your opponent, which, again, as we mentioned, Clear World would be your best friend. It's just another option to punish your opponent with Clear World, just in case if somehow you don't have Clear Vicious Knight, or, you know, it's just, I find it interesting. But there's another use for this, which I will mention later in the extra deck scenario, which is what we're about to get into. And the reason for that is because I am a little bit insane. It is for this card, Five-Headed Linked Dragon, which this requires 5 monsters, but with the Horus engine and the floating effects of Clear Cube, if you really, really need to end the game, I feel like this is a good finisher. Basically, it must be link summoned. If this is link summoned using, guess what, every attribute, except for technically light, because that's the meme about Five-Headed Linked Dragon. It's weak to light. Then you can destroy all cards your opponent controls, and then it cannot be destroyed by battle, except again with light. So unless your opponent is running a light-specific deck with Honest, which would be hilarious if they managed to get that through, then it won't be destroyed. Also, it's unaffected by other card effects, which means evenly and other things will not affect it, because you know how most cards say it's unaffected by your opponent's card effects. Now, this is just unaffected in general by other card effects excluding. So it won't be, it cannot be removed, I believe, unless I'm crazy, but, you know, someone correct me if I was wrong about that. During your end phase, you must banish 5 cards from your graveyard face down. It's not optional, or send it to the graveyard, but that's fine because we have the Horus engine, and we usually discard cards like Clear Phantom with other cards that we don't need anyway, so that kind of performs that in a very good situation. But basically, if it was link someone using these attributes, and again with Rainbow Volition, which treats it as those attributes, you can destroy all cards your opponent controls, so it is a blow up your opponent's field scenario. And this thing has 5,000 base attack, which is the highest that any printed card can have, is 5,000 base attack. And then we have some other XYZs that are popular to use back in the day, like number 38, Harbinger. This one's kind of good to stall and to negate your opponent's spells if it's very spell-oriented. We have the Zombie Vampire. If you need to dig through your deck more for more Horus monsters to summon, it helps immensely. Or you can bring back a Clear Cube or something. That would really help to flip into something else. There's Heretic Sky Dragon Overlord, which is used for just negating anything your opponent would target on the field, graveyard, or banished, which is really nice. It's just a little negate card. I run Infection Buzz King just for some graveyard shenanigory and destroying cards to inflict damage. We have Galaxy Cipher in here. This is just used for banish fodder, to be honest. There's Coach King, which you could use to draw cards, but I only use this for fodder, honestly. I usually find that Dingirsu is very nice because it, again, protects your cards from being destroyed if you went first, and if you're like really worried whether or not your opponent had like Lightning Storm or something, you'll just protect everything at once, which is still kind of nice. And also, one of my personal favorites that not a lot of people use is number 23, the Lancelot Dark Knight of the Underworld, which is a nice negate in many senses, more than one. I will explain this card, and that is when it has XY's material. If inflicts battle damage to your opponent, you can target a face-up card your opponent controls, monster that's face-up, and destroy it. And it can attack directly while it has material. In addition to that, even though you can't control this, once returned during either player's turn, when anyone activates a spell trap or another monster's effect, detach one, negate the activation. So it negates anything, though that's good a benefit as well as a hindrance, because it will negate any effect that immediately activates. You do not get to choose when to activate that. But it also benefits for attacking directly, has 2,000 attack, so that's pretty sweet. And then it removes a monster after the fact, which I think is a pretty solidified option for the deck. Granted, this was only like barely 1, 2, 3, like about like 10 extra deck cards. You can put other cards in here if you want, like SPN stuff, obviously the Nightmare cards if you really need to. But basically, all these cards that I chose, I really think it's a very interesting combination, and also I'm just really glad that I can finally make at least somewhat a feasible, semi-fun, competitive Clear World deck, because I've been waiting for this for years, and also because I just like the uniqueness that is Clear World, that just punishes your opponent, and also the combination of how the monsters really synergize with one another. Not the, well, I mean, yeah, the horse monsters too, but mostly just like the clear worlds in general. But yeah, that would be it. And I'm going to go ahead and get going. Oh, and before I do, forgot. I'm going to do a little extra thing here. I forgot to, so in my haste, I did end up getting Maze of the Master, but I forgot to bring some home with me. We got a little too excited, so me and a friend ended up opening everything at the OTS that we were in. So I'm just going to show some of my findings of what I got from roughly 4 boxes, which is I got like 3 copies of Tech on Prime, 2 of Switchgerald, or I don't know how to say that, Switchgerald. I got 2 of Draxluxion. I got a Verdict of Anubis, the Judge, Serket, the Treasures of the Kings. These are just the supers that I was holding on for later. I got 2 X-Cross Canyons, 2 Union activations. Almost 2 of everything regarding the new Kaiba cards, honestly. The Union Controller. I did get 1 7 Tachyon, 1 Singularity Fiend, and then a Duke of Demise, and 1 Ancient Gear statue. The only Ultra that was missing after that was Trickstar, or what was it, that Marine Sys Trickstar card that was like treated as both cards. I gave that one to my friend, and a few other cards. But those were not the high rarity ones. And then the only nice card I got was A to Z Energy Load. So, yeah, there we go. So I just wanted to show that out there because I didn't want to, I completely forgot that I had to take some home. I just got too excited, so I was just like, you know, I was over here going like, you know, yay, clear world. So, but anyway, thank you, and I'll see you maybe somewhere around Rarity Collection and Duelist Alliance will be the last times I will probably be doing this type of content. Later.